Hey everyone, I am reading through all the Fighting Fantasy game books. You can see my intro video up there. And today we are on to book 2, The Citadel of Chaos. So after collaborating on the first book, Steve Jackson and Ian Livingstone, they decided to do one book each. And so this second book, The Citadel of Chaos, is solely written by Steve Jackson. And instead of a mountain, there's a tower with another wizard to defeat. It's a pretty decent follow-up to the first book. Now, the first book was published in 1982. This second book is published in 1983. They actually did 4 books in 1983. It was a pretty big year in movies. Return of the Jedi came out in 83. The movie War Games came out, which had Matthew Broderick in it, and this is before he did Ferris Bueller's Day Off. There was also Tom Cruise in Risky Business and Nicole Kidman in BMX Bandits. Oh yeah, check out that hair. The final episode of MASH aired in 1983. Also, that's the year that Michael Jackson's Thriller album came out and the year he first showed off the moonwalk. I remember seeing the moonwalk for the first time and it was just like, whoa, mind blown. In the video arcades, Dragon's Lair came out, which was just so different to anything else in the arcades at that time. And there was also the first Mario Brothers game. On the Apple II in 1983, 2 very important games came out, Lode Runner and Rescue Raiders. If you know, you know. Now back to the book. So obviously the author is Steve Jackson. He did not do all that many books actually in the full run of the series. He did book 4 and book 10 and some others. Ian Livingstone did most of the books in the first 10. All right, get rid of that one. Onto the cover. Well, this cover is the original cover. This is by a guy called Emmanuel. And of course there's the Citadel in the background, but what the heck is this creature? After reading the book, I'm still not quite sure what this creature is. Now, this is the only book cover he did for Fighting Fantasy. He is most famous probably for the cover of the Fiend Folio, which is a first edition D&D book. It's basically a monster manual that was created in the UK, mostly by entries from the White Dwarf magazine, which again, White Dwarf is a magazine published by the Games Workshop, which is set up by Steve Jackson and Ian Livingstone. And that was back in the day when White Dwarf had a lot of articles about D&D and other role-playing games before it became just solely Warhammer. Anyway, this monster on the cover is actually the Githyanki. Another bit of trivia is that the Githyanki is a monster that was submitted to White Dwarf magazine by Charles Stross, the science fiction writer. And related to the Citadel of Chaos, this picture here of the Githyanki is done by Russ Nicholson, who did all the illustrations in the Citadel of Chaos. Now, one other thing about the cover, this cover was actually replaced by another cover. I don't have that edition. It's by Ian Miller. Ian Miller did a bunch of other Fighting Fantasy covers, including all these ones. And number 57, but I don't have 57 Mage Hunter yet. Hopefully I'll have a copy of that by the time I get up to 57. So that's everything on the cover. So back to the illustrator, Russ Nicholson. So he did the illustrations in the first book and he did them for this book as well. And again, they have the section reference over here with a bit of the description, which they only did for the first 3 books as far as I can tell. This illustration is interesting because this monster basically forms the cover for subsequent editions. As to the setting of this book, it's basically the same as the first book, and later books make it clear that it's in Alancia, on the world of Titan, it's in the northwest, and it's just to the south of the first book. Now on to new mechanics. This book does have a new mechanic. It has magic spells. You get to roll a number, which is how many spells you get to choose from this magic spell list. And because there are spells for things like stamina restoration, you don't get any provisions in this book, which after reading it kind of makes sense because you really don't have time to sit around and eat food. Couple of notable things about this book. It is the only fighting fantasy book to have its cover changed so quickly after its first printing. Warlock of Firetop Mountain did have its cover changed as well, but that was still by the same artist, and it's quite similar to the original cover. Whereas this one, it was quite radically changed. And the other notable thing about this, although it's more in the design department, is that it's very hard to actually map because there's a real lack of clear direction. It will have a room and it will say there's a door from the room, but it won't say that it's in the west wall or the east wall. You just know that there's some door. Another example is you're walking along a corridor, it says there's another corridor branching off it and there are stairs down. But it's like, okay, is that corridor branching off to the left or to the right? And are the stairs going straight ahead? It's really confusing. So when you're creating your map, it's quite unclear where you should be drawing your lines. And this shows itself when you look at maps that people have posted online for this book. They do have all sorts of designs because of that uncertainty about the actual layout of the Citadel. All right, onto my character, and I had a bunch of shocking rolls. I had an initial skill of 7, which is the worst you can get. My stamina was okay, and my luck was also pretty crap. My name was Goldstaff, Sorcerer of Light. So right at the start, my first fight at the gate of the Citadel drained half my stamina, and these were supposedly easy monsters. But one thing I had going for me is I had a lot of magic spells, so I started to use those very liberally. By the way, here's my very dodgy map. And I seem to be traveling okay. I actually got to the tower in the Citadel, but then I encountered some guy and this floating dog head in a room, and I cast an illusion spell, and that resulted in an insta-death. So I only got through 50 sections before I died. Poor Goldstaff. So I created Goldstaff II. He actually had a decent skill. And in my second playthrough, I only got through 74 sections before flying to my death from the top of the tower because I'd already used my levitation spell. Although reading through all the options later, even if you have the levitation spell, you still die. Basically, that room is a total death trap with no possibility of success unless you've got certain items, which you only get if you go a certain path through the Citadel. You could say it's odd, but I think it's a bad design choice. So how many sections did I get through? Well, 50 in my first run, 74 in my second run. I didn't do any after that. I decided to just read through every section. Death by, I'm going to say it's death by bad design. Although strictly speaking, it was by plummeting to my death from a great height. So then I read through the whole thing and some comments about the design. Steve's books always have more branching than Ian's. And right from the start of this book, you have to make choices that send you off in completely different directions. There's also less combat in this book than the first one. There's generally more options before you have to resort to combat. And the boss battle at the end is extensive. There's an explosion of choices, which means you run out of fingers in the book if you're trying to keep track of all the various options. And unfortunately, this book suffers from the one true path syndrome. Towards the end, the only way to get past some of the sections requires you to have particular items, and they're only available in particular paths of the book. So yes, you can get through this book with very minimal stats, but only if you know exactly where to go. And now a comment on the story and theme. The whole concept of this Citadel is quite well done. The whole beginning section is quite amazing in that there's this courtyard, this outdoor area, and there's a whole bunch of things in that courtyard, and there's a lot to explore in there. It kind of goes off the rails once you get into the actual tower itself. It certainly lives up to its name of the Citadel of Chaos. Onto the difficulty score for this, and it's a bit tricky because of that problem with the one true path syndrome. In some respects it's hard, but you don't need good stats in order to complete this book if you know where you're going. So it's kind of moderate in difficulty. It's not super hard and it's not super easy. And as for an overall rating, I give this one 8 out of 10. I think it's a valiant first effort at trying to incorporate magic into these books, and it does have a really cool theme and structure to it. So that's it for book number 2, The Citadel of Chaos. My next book will be The Forest of Doom, book number 3. Have you read The Citadel of Chaos? Drop a comment down below, and I will see you in my Forest of Doom video.